Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. And, I love doing this show because every week I get to talk to smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of companies ranging from Netflix to Kinko's to YPO, EO Activation, Blizzard, LendingTree, OpenTable, Axe Software, and many more. I'm also the co-founder of Rise25, where we help connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And this week on our top digital agency series, we have got Frank Cowell. He's a speaker, best-selling author, CEO of Digitopia, which is a revenue operations firm based in San Diego, California. He has over 20 years of experience in digital marketing, and he works with CEOs, CMOs, and vice presidents of sales and marketing who are looking to create amazing brand experiences while accelerating growth. He founded his first agency in early 2004. And what's interesting, to me at least, is he developed a early content management system, CMS. You've heard of like WordPress? Well, this is similar type of idea very early on. So we're going to talk about how he developed that and how he's morphed the agency and company over the years into a different type of company. He's also the author of Building Your Digital Utopia and host of the Digital Utopia podcast. And of course, this podcast is brought to you by Rise25, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And if you have any questions about how that works, go to rise25media.com or email us at support@rise25media.com. All right, Frank, and a couple of other things I just want to give you a quick shout out for. First of all, thank you, sir, for your service in the Marine Corps. And also, I know you are a survivor of 4 children like I am. So we've walked that walk, not so easy. But exactly. Let's talk about, when you started your company, you started by no easy task, creating a content management system. This is even before WordPress was around. And, in those days, just imagine a Herculean effort to put something like that together. So how did you take on that as an initial project when you're getting your company off the ground? Seems just like a massive undertaking.
Yeah. So thanks for having me, John. I'm excited to share this story and some of the other things that we've talked about with your audience, on the topic of the content management system. If I go back to the mid 90s, now this is about 95, 96, there was this thing called the World Wide Web, or the information superhighway. And back then, there was no such thing as Google. In fact, there weren't any search engines at the time. And you would buy a Yellow Pages book, quite literally, a physical book of the various websites that you could look at on the internet. So I'm dating myself. I'm a dinosaur in terms of the internet and the World Wide Web and what people know of it today. And so back then, I became really intrigued about this idea of having a web page. What does that mean? And I remember early on, someone told me, I forget who it was, but they said, oh yeah, your AOL account, you can actually host a web page on there and other people in AOL can find it. I was like, really? So I started, I went home that night and I started poking around at these web pages. I was like, this is fascinating. You could probably make money with this. And so my first foray into the internet was actually putting up a web page or two to sell information-based products within the AOL kind of universe, which was really kind of an early, World Wide Web before, the rest of us really knew what that was. And that really started. Did it take a while before you made some sales, or did you make sales? No, it actually happened. It happened kind of quickly.
Wow.
But then there just weren't these concepts of like SEO and paid advertising and whatnot. There weren't concepts like that. So, the orders would literally come in through the mail I'd open an envelope and there's a check.
So you didn't have a way of accepting payment online?
Oh, no. There wasn't even online payments. Like I would get checks in the mail and then I would physically mail them the information packet that they requested, not even like emailing a PDF. So
wow.
That's
what were you selling? What was the information?
Oh, there were a couple of things at the time. One was a packet on different work from home programs. And then the other one was like reselling 1-900 numbers. And, once you had one, you can kind of put whatever content on it you wanted. There were a couple of different things.
And yeah, I know you're a big advocate of content now, creating content. So was what you were doing essentially creating content in these early days, or was it?
Oh yeah, that was
minimal?
essentially, an info-based product business is all that was. And which wasn't new, right? The internet brought a new era of that into the forefront, but info-based businesses have been around a long time pre-internet. So the internet just really like took those things to another level. So that kind of really started my passion for like, whoa, what's possible on this thing? And just really dug in and taught myself how to program, because I remember the first time I put up that web page, I had to pay some guy I found on AOL $50 to develop the web page. And at the time, to me, that was a lot of money at the time, and I had to ask my wife for the $50. Like, hey, is it okay if I use $50? Like, that's the situation I was in at that time. And I remember when I wanted to make updates to it, I was like, oh crap, he's going to want to charge me $50 again. So I just cracked open the file. I had done some programming when I was in junior high, some AppleSoft Basic. And I was like, I can figure this out. And once I saw that you could, work with the tagging system that was HTML, then my mind kind of exploded. And then I kind of just went for it from there. And that eventually led to me working for a web development company in marketing. I wasn't a web developer. And they had a content management system. And this was enterprise level. And I just started programming at home as a hobby, really just truly as a hobby. And I had this, what Michael Gerber and the E-Myth calls an entrepreneurial seizure, which is, hey, I could do that better. I could build a better CMS. And I did. I set up my computer as a web server, and I just started coding my brains out and started building something that I thought was better. And I didn't have a business plan. I didn't even have any intent really for business, other than I had already kind of been helping people build websites on the side. And so eventually I got to the point where I said, I kept threatening myself, I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And this went on for like 6 months. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do this soon. I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to start my own web development shop. And then the company ended up laying me off because I was working remote, and they wanted all remote workers to come back home. And that was back when remote workers weren't looked favorably upon.
Yeah.
And I said, nope, I'm already living where I'm living. This is kind of like the violent shove I needed. And so that kind of started my journey. So I went into the marketplace as a web development, company of one. And
but using the content management
using
system
the CMS
as like,
that I had built. Yeah.
Essentially like saving you time, can making it easier to develop these web pages, probably.
Correct. Because
rather than a software tool in itself or selling.
Yeah. Back then, the general marketplace didn't know what a content management system was. It was really only for the enterprise. And I wasn't selling the enterprise stupidly. I was selling to really small mom and pop businesses, and they weren't even trained to know to expect CMS and what it could do for them and whatnot. So there were a lot of things that I did wrong in the launch of that venture. Like I should have just launched it as a software company. I should have just launched it as, aimed at the enterprise in so many things, but instead I was doing, websites for small businesses, leveraging my CMS.
Yeah. And hard, I'm sure lots of challenges back then. Imagine by that point, 2002, you could probably accept payments online, but it still wasn't easy, I'm sure. Even if you could figure
easy. In fact, the big thing back then was the Yahoo e-commerce platform, the Yahoo shops. That was the big thing back then. And that lasted, they actually had a pretty good corner on the market for a little while. They were pretty innovative, but then it was so proprietary. It just wasn't able to grow exponentially the way things do on the internet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny. I around this time, so 99, I'm working at the White House in the Clinton years, and I self-taught myself HTML at the time in order to create a website. And I remember how difficult it was. I used Netscape Navigator, and there was something, there was a web designer built within that I used to build web pages, but it still was so manual. Even like linking one web page to another web page and creating those links was such a pain in the butt. It's when I discovered WordPress. I was like, oh my God, this is revolutionary. It saves so much time. Yeah. So what, do you remember the name of this? Did you have a name for the CMS? Did it even have a name?
I did. I called it CMSX.
Got it. So looking back now, you probably, if you were to do it over again, you probably would have made it more of its own software startup.
Oh, 1,000%. Because I was so early, I actually could have garnered a lot of enterprise level conversations and had a lot of big software deals go down. Yeah. The way I built it was very modular, where WordPress has plugins or whatever. I had, the similar concept of plugins and a whole framework for how developers could develop on the platform and just follow a few simple
Yeah.
rules and create plugins. So along with a site hierarchy tree, like site tree type thing,
Wow.
the whole nine. So definitely, like if I could go smack myself silly back then and go back in time, I'd say, hey, go to IBM, go to Coke, go to Dell, go to HP, go to these companies and sell them, license the software.
Right.
That would have been the game changer.
Right. Hindsight's 2020. So,
Sure is.
but with that knowledge, though, I'm sure that was really advantageous for you as you morphed into what became an agency, what became your company now. And I want to talk about. I know, for many years you were more project based, and then you shift to more of a recurring service, which is a real challenge for a lot of companies. There's a lot of companies like that find themselves in creating kind of projects, but they want something more recurring, which creates more predictable revenue. So talk a little bit about how you came to that realization and how you made that shift.
Yeah. So, over the years, that web development company morphed more into like a full service marketing firm where we were doing brand development and web development as our two core service lines. And then we had a lot of other ancillary supporting things that a marketing department might ask for, miscellaneous graphic design, collateral support. We were even doing commercial quality videos at one point. I got to the point where we could turn out great creative work, both on the web and the branding side. And we knew what we were doing. I could sell pretty darn well. And the problem with that business model, though, it was just so reliant upon, landing the big projects. And I just saw that scaling those kinds of companies seemed to be very difficult as I looked around other companies that had done it and other companies that were struggling to do it. And so what sounded reasonable to me based on my research at the time is if we just had a recurring revenue model, then we wouldn't be, trying to find our new lunch every month and then revenue would stack.
Yeah.
And so we had a few fits and starts to try to find a recurring revenue model, but then roughly 2015, we landed upon what that would be. And we commenced to going full bore into that. And so made a number of mistakes in doing that. That'll be the big theme of your interview with me, as all the things that I know I did wrong then.
Well, what were some of the big mistakes? And did you have any, big moments of, oh my gosh, I don't know if we're gonna be able to make payroll this month, that sort of thing?
Fortunately, I always made payroll, even when we were small and figuring things out. And, there were probably moments early on where it was like cutting it close, but never had a moment where I was like, I don't know if we're going to make it. I got to go borrow money. Thank God. I never did that. And I was always able to sell and manage the cash fairly well. But, some of the mistakes were that I just made too many hard right turns, and something my mentor has now told me within the past couple of years. He's like, Frank, no hard right turns. Soft, big curves is how you bring about change in a business. And, I was just naive enough, arrogant enough to think, we were good at doing what we did. I'm good at selling. We'll just do this other thing because I understand it really well from a philosophical and strategic point of view. We'll just launch into these other services and it'll be fine. We'll have them up and running in 30 days was my thinking at the time. And we pretty much in short order just ditched the things that we were amazing at, which was brand development and web development. And we just, we ditched them, said, okay, we're not doing any more brand projects ever again.
That's a tough thing to say. We're amazing at this and we're going to leave it behind to do this new thing, which we maybe are not as amazing at yet.
Yeah. And so my learning lesson was that, anytime that I want to make a change in the business and create a new direction or maybe evolve the company, it has to be based on our strengths and what we're good at. So for example, when we launched into that recurring services model, we were providing and still are to this day, inbound marketing services, right? Well, what I should have done back then is said, okay, what aspects of inbound align with the skill sets we already have? And what are the unique ways in which we could actually execute on that particular thing the rest of the industry does a certain way? So for example, let's say within inbound, a big activity component, a tactical component is, let's say, landing pages. Let's use that as an example. Well, because we were already familiar with creative design and web development, my my first foray into recurring services probably should have been something around just landing pages. That's it.
Yeah. Just
We
dipping your
could have,
toe in the water with
correct.
one
And we
little
could have
service.
said,
Yeah.
if you want the best landing pages in the world to support your lead generation, your inbound lead generation efforts, come to us. That's what we do. Instead of trying to say we do everything inbound. That's the learning lesson. Is I would have taken our amazing skills at copy, brand positioning, brand, awareness, design and dev. I should have taken those exact same skills and said, we will do, your landing page and ongoing conversion rate optimization. And that would have been the recurring service. And it would have been small, but it would have been a very successful recurring service because we were very good at the skill sets that would have been required to do that. That's what I know now. That back then, younger Frank was, very stupid and thought and very arrogant and thought we can just make this wholesale shift. And this is what we're going to do because I could strategically talk about it really well. And that's the massive difference. It doesn't matter if I can talk about it real well or I could sell it. What can the team actually produce?
Yeah.
What unique collection of people and talents have we spent years developing? And how do we use that? It was the right question that I was not asking myself at the time.
So rather than looking at the massive service that you want the business to be all about, is looking at the team, the talent you have first, and seeing what can grow out of that and then expand from one service to many more.
Yeah, it's definitely been something I've learned over the years, is that in any big solution, there are many components within the solution that unto themselves, they're their own big business. If you dominate it, if you do it right, if you obsess about the quality and the outcome of that component, that in itself could be an entire big business.
Right. This is about niching, really, right? Just niching down into something.
Niching into a service area. Yeah. Specializing in a service area.
Yeah.
And getting really good at it such that you're so good, you don't do the other things, but it drives tremendous value for your client.
Yeah. Our company has done this a couple of times, pivots where, we left something behind. And, I can think of some years where our revenue was like this up and down, and that's why we did the pivot, because we wanted it to be more stable, which it has become. How long did it take for you from the point of deciding you're going to make this shift to the point where you felt like, okay, we've, obviously we have more that we want to do, but we feel like we've executed this shift. We're more predictable, stable, consistent. It's not as project-based. It's more of a recurring platform now.
I would say it took a few years to really fully make the shift. Our revenue was all replaced by recurring rev. And it probably took a good 6 months before we had an offering in place. And I thought it was going to be 30 days,
Wow.
at the outset. And so I think that just, if any of your listeners are considering making, wholesale business model shifts, I would say step back, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. What is the unique collection of talent and IP that you've developed to date? And how can you use that exact same IP and talent and do it just a little differently?
It's a great question for people to ask. I want to ask you, one of the hard shifts when you go from a project-based, business model, maybe you have a project that lasts 6 months or 60 days or 90 days or something, let's say something along those lines, to shifting where you have something where you want, maybe the client is worth less on a month-to-month basis, but over the long term, they're worth more, is you have to start focusing on making sure the clients are really happy and keeping your churn down. What are some learnings that you've had around that?
Well, I think one of the big things the mistakes that we've made, and I find a lot of other professional service providers make, is the solutions are often developed based on what the technical people think is a good solution, instead of talking to clients and really figuring out what the product market fit needs to be. So product market fit, as you mentioned, is job number one. And to me, I think that means getting narrower, doing less. How can we, on each subcomponent, just crush it and be world-class? Again, to my earlier point, such that you're so good at it, that alone could be its own big, big business. And so that is probably the biggest takeaway, is getting small, getting narrow, and in obsessing over the value, the output, the outcome of what you do, not the hours of what you do, not the hands of what you do, not the scope of what you do, but the outcome. And then what are clients willing to pay for that? And I think the narrower you can get that, that means you stand a better chance that you can hire an army of people that can execute on that, because it's narrow. And to me, that's how if I were to build a business all over again, that's professional services, which I would really question myself if I did that. But if I were to do professional services all over again, I'd start very narrow, and ensure that that outcome is wildly valuable.
Yeah. You do see that a lot with repeat entrepreneurs when they start a new business. It's like really, really narrow. It's like you can tell how they, how they learn their lesson. You're involved in entrepreneurs organization in San Diego. I'm involved up here in San Francisco. And before I was in Accelerator, and I remember a couple of years ago for a meeting that I had where I was making this presentation to our accountability group. And I was talking about what we were focused on with the business. And I just thought I was rocking it. Like, oh, it was just so great. And immediately afterwards, the coach who's sitting there was like, I don't understand one thing, what you're doing. And I look back on it now and I realized it was like it was trying to build 4 different businesses in once. Yeah. 4 different focuses, like completely different markets and everything. And it was just a mess, and once we got rid of all that, focused on one thing, that's really what helped. I want to ask you about March of 2020. Okay. March of 2020, that date is seared in all of our brains because that's when COVID hit.
Yep.
Take me back to that moment in time. You've got a team that's all working together under one roof, offices, and then one day they're all gone and it's just you showing up to the office. How did it hit you, and what was that experience like for you, Frank?
Yeah, so I remember when that hit. It was a Monday when we heard over the weekend, oh, these lockdowns and these restrictions and all the stay-at-home orders and all these things. And it was just like it was like out of like 1984, George Orwell. It was kind of like Orwellian, right? We're like, what is this? Like, never even experienced anything like this in my life. And so it was all very surreal. So I remember during that first week when we're like, okay, everyone, like, don't come into the office. Well, I was still going into the office during that first week. And I remember about the 3rd day, 4th day, and we were just a large number of our clients had been adversely affected by the stay-at-home orders, which meant their businesses were kind of essentially shut down.
Do you have a lot of restaurant clients, or what?
No, not a lot of restaurant. We just had a number of clients who, for one reason or another, their service volume, their patronage just shut down overnight. So they in turn started putting in cancellation notices with us. Like it was raining from the sky, cancellation notices.
Yeah.
And I remember being in the office one day by myself, the ghost town. I was parked up in the conference room, which was closer to the front door because I wanted to see if, whoever would come in. And I remember just having my head down in my hands. And one person did come in to get a computer or something. And they're like, hey, what are you doing? And I just look up and I looked up kind of just for the first time in my life, like no answer for this person. And that was really scary. It's probably the scariest time in my entrepreneurial career. But it was shortly after that I decided to, slap myself, wake myself up and say, hey, you know what? Doesn't matter if we go out of business. I am not going to go out like that. I am not going to be a coward. I'm not going to show my team that there's no leader at the helm. I'm not going to help stoke fear among my team. There's no way I'm going to go out like that. So I had to smack myself silly and say, okay, let's go. And so from that point on, I kind of took a wartime effort where I gathered my executive team and every morning we huddled. Did you get any more cancellations? Who's doing what? Who's on top of what? What clients do we still have? Like every day we gave a status update. What's going on? What are you doing? What are the actions? And we just met like it was a military, a military thing, sometimes multiple times per day. And so I just took a very much wartime approach to it and said, nope. I don't care what happens, we have to be proud. If you do go down, like you have to be proud of how you go down.
Right.
And so from that point on, we were able to survive. We had to make some cuts and we were fortunate to get first round of PPP and a number of other moves we made. And, we survived through it. And,
What were some of those moves? Did you have to do layoffs?
Yeah, we had to do some layoffs, which was really tough. One of those was one of my oldest son who worked for the company at the time.
Wow.
Even, so, we had to do some things that were.
What was that like?
Emotional and very tough.
Your oldest son is 28 or 27? 27. So what was that like?
Yeah, it was tough. I got to tell you, I obviously being my son, that made it even more emotional, but yeah, I had a few other people that we laid off too. And that wasn't, necessarily a walk in the park, that's tough to do. And then we had to tighten the belt. A few, the shareholders, the owners who work in the business, all took pay cuts for a period of time, went without pay for a period of time. And that didn't last that long. We buckled down, we stabilized, we took account of the clients that we did have remaining. And, we still were selling and landing new business. And so once we got a good lay of the land, then we were able to say, okay, let's start behaving like business as usual. We've made the adjustments. Let's get back to our rhythms. And that was really critical for me to get the company back into the rhythms. Because otherwise,
you kind of
the day-to-day experience for everybody would have been filled with fear and filled with uncertainty and filled with doubt. And that doesn't help anybody.
Right. I want to ask you about, you mentioned a mentor earlier. Who did you turn to at these different times? It could be, you could also reference when you shifted over to from the project based to the more recurring service. Were there mentors, their EO forum mates? I think that oftentimes there are certain trusted people that we turn to that help guide us through these tough periods. So did you have people like that?
Yeah, absolutely. There were, my mentor who I met was connected to through EO. There was another gentleman in EO that was part of a coaching group of his at the time because he was actually testing a new coaching offering. And I was like, yeah, I'll jump in on that and help you out. And maybe it'll help me out as well. And so that gentleman, he got on the phone with me just to do some literal, completely outside of what he was testing because everyone kind of dropped out of his program all at once because of what happened. And, he talked me through some things. My forum mates, my EO forum mates, they all, were there to listen and talk and give ideas. So going through that time specifically, those people were very valuable. And then just at large, outside of COVID crisis times, my mentor has been great. I've got great business partners. There are a couple of people outside of that group, other agency owners that have always been very generous with their time and their wisdom. One gentleman in particular, who's also in EO San Diego, Ni Ahena, has been, just amazing and giving with his knowledge. And this is a gentleman who's been very, very successful in our space, been very gracious with his time. Another gentleman out of EO San Diego recently, chatted with me, Grayson LaFriends, very generous with his time and his knowledge sharing. And he's also been very, very successful in our space. Gentleman on the East Coast, Bob Ruffalo, runs an inbound shop and very generous and have become a great friend, business friend and always willing to share what they're doing and what's working, what's not working. So, this business, while it may look like these people on the outside are competitors, just so many people that have just been willing to give and do the experience share thing. So lots of really cool people along the way.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you also, I'm blanking on my original question that I had, but let's shift to this. So as you started to get through the pandemic, was there a moment where you realized that you were kind of coming through this and you're going to get through it just fine? And was there any would you attribute getting through it to any big shifts? Like, did you have to switch to a different niche? Did you have to switch to a different industry? Any wholesale changes like that? Or is it just kind of like, a lot of businesses say that there was like a month or two period that they just kind of got through. And then once they got through that, things started to rebuild on their own. Which was it for you?
I would say it took a few months. There were a few months of uncertainty and just kind of like not being in regular rhythms and in 2 to 3 months. And that's when We really kind of got back to normal in how we run the business. And that was a good feeling because it felt like, okay, we'll be fine. This may suck for the next year, but we'll be fine. And so that feeling was very important, and it was very important to communicate that to the team. And then the other thing that came through that process was just a reflection on my own leadership and management capabilities, and requiring that I step up and bring about more accountability in the organization, especially amongst my team, the team that reports to me. And so that's an area where I think there's been a lot of growth over the past year, and I'm excited about what that's done and how that galvanized me personally and what I expect of myself. And so that's been fun to go through in hindsight.
Yeah, that's great. All right, well, I want to. We're short on time, so I want to wrap things up. And I kind of already asked this question. You might have already answered it, but I'll ask it anyways. So I'm a big fan of gratitude, and if you look around at your peers, your contemporaries, others in your industry, who do you respect? Who do you admire? People that are doing good work, and it might be some of those that you mentioned already, but it could also be others that you maybe don't have as close a personal relationship with, but you still respect and admire the work that they do.
Yeah, I would say, the three gentlemen that I just mentioned, tons of respect for what they've done in this space, because growing a professional services firm is not easy. It's not like a widget on the shelf where, you could always recoup your investment in it and sell it at a discount and dump into other materials and, leverage, in professional services. Once the time is gone, it's gone. You don't dust it off and sell it at a discount to recoup your investment there. So it's not easy to grow a professional services firm. You're gathering a lot of talent and trying to assemble that in a way that is unique and different, but, more importantly, effective. So tons of respect to those guys that I just mentioned. And, just so many other people out there that are, tons of people in like the EO community, for example. Like, it's not a specific person, but the EO community at large, tons of respect for that community and how willing they are to show up and give value, in the Slack channel that we're in. All you have to say is, hey gang, I'm struggling with X. Anyone have any experience with this? And you're going to see people come out of the woodwork, and people willing to literally jump on Zoom calls. In fact, I was just doing that today for another gentleman's. He posted in the Slack channel, hey, I have questions about KPIs when it comes to marketing, and how should I hold my head of marketing accountable? What numbers, what metrics, what KPIs would you define? So it's like, hey, let's jump on a Zoom. I'll show you this thing I call the 7-box method. And this is what we do to create that kind of clarity for everyone on the team, including marketing. And people do that kind of stuff all the time in EO. So just huge respect to the EO crowd. They've been pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'd second that for sure. Frank, this has been great. Where can people go to learn more about you, learn more about your book, and check that out? Check out your podcast. Where can people go? buildingyourdigitalutopia.com. So it's the name of the book, Building Your Digital Utopia, buildingyourdigitalutopia.com. Learn more about the book. We have some free resources for you to download. You can check out the episodes of the podcast, and along with some other things there as well. And Digitopia.agency is your agency website.
Is
right?
The agency, is the services
Excellent.
firm. So if you go to buildingyourdigitalutopia.com, there's no real big pitch there. It's just really about what we teach with the methodology, the Digital Utopia methodology, and the resources, the framework. Get educated, listen to the podcast, read some articles, download some tools.
Excellent. Great, Frank. Thanks so much.
John, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.